real conversations, and some hard truths. Gangs, drugs, and guns. Giving a voice to those willing to sacrifice. We have stories that need to be told. We have lessons that need to be taught. Protect and serve. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Hey everybody, welcome back. Nathan Romas with you. Today we are going to be talking about the prevention and intervention with gang members, particularly youth gangs. For that, I have Jessy Johal on the program. Jessy began as an outreach worker with the award-winning wraparound program within the Surrey School District with a focus on at-risk youth involved in gangs. Jessy has collaborated with the Surrey RCMP Youth Unit and Gang Enforcement Team, from which he developed prevention and intervention strategies. He has also played a key role in delivering the gang reduction through informed practice, or GRIP, provincial strategy, which we'll get into. He partnered with Safer Schools Together and the BC Ministry of Public Safety for that. Jessy's experience extends to understanding negative youth dynamics and connections to organized crime groups, regionally, provincially, and nationally. Now, he provides training in gang behavioral digital threat assessment to various gang investigators, associations, and personnel. So welcome, Jessy.
Thanks for having me, Nathan. I appreciate it.
Glad to have you on here. Every time I read stuff about people working with government, I always screw it up. It's like a giant tongue twister because they always get like the most ridiculous long names. So.
Especially as a contractor, right? You're looking at the Ministry of Education and Childcare and Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General. And even me, it's a tongue twister.
You know what? We were just talking off air just before we fired this up. You were out in Edmonton recently. So what kind of brought you out here to super tourist destination Edmonton?
It's funny you say that. It was freezing, especially for us coming out there, leaving here while the sun was out and landing at, I think it was -9.
Mm-hmm.
It was cold. It was great being out in Edmonton. We came under, we'll get into it, but a federal grant that was launched, distributed out nationally, 250 million for gang prevention and intervention strategies from the federal government, Public Safety Canada, and Edmonton. The city of Edmonton actually received some of those funding, and through that, we've been supporting the city of Edmonton collaborate and kind of get some strategies in place. So, just supporting the city of Edmonton, and during my time out there, a good friend and mentor of mine, Sergeant Ryan Ferry, he's actually on the steering committee in understanding dynamics of the city of Edmonton and the police side of the world. I got two night shifts, right? 2 night shifts of a ride along. So that was fantastic. It was great to understand the dynamics, but man, does it get colder and colder when we hit the midnight hours.
Yeah, well, it's nice being kind of, I guess, out of patrol in the gang unit. So I don't have to like hold a point necessarily out in the freezing cold. I can kind of like run into a venue and run out, just stick between the car and that. Did you get to interact with anybody that you knew, like on the gang side? Is there anybody you run into out here do you know anyone out here from that side of things?
Through, some of the work we do, there are connections. Right, and we'll get into that, the connectivity of gang members.
Mm-hmm.
So I am aware that a lot of our BC gang members, some of the youth even I used to work with that are operating in Edmonton. But during my ride along, Sergeant Ferry really wanted to get me out there and show me. So it wasn't really sitting in the car; it was more so learning from him. And we did do a traffic stop whereby there's an individual that was from Edmonton, had a lot of previous history with Sergeant Ferry, and he actually said he's getting away from Edmonton and coming into Surrey. And as observer, I'll stand there and I said, it's not any quieter in Surrey. Let's just say that. And obviously in the back of my head, I don't. Okay, well, if you're in Surrey, you're very well connected, because Sergeant Ferry is mentioning that his family is still in Edmonton. He's got a few pieces going on, moving pieces with the law in Edmonton.
Mm-hmm.
For gang associated behavior. So it's funny because he's like, I'm out of here, man. Like, and then he looks at me and he goes, Are you brown? Yeah, I am. Are you new? No. And where are you from? what's your name? Like various questions. And the thing with Surrey is very small.
Yes.
So when we ran him, he's born the same year as me. So when I say it's Surrey small, we there he'll find a nexus in Surrey once he goes back into Surrey where he's residing at the moment, to figure out potentially who I am, or through the basketball world, or through community, right? Especially the South Asian community. It's very well interconnected. So yeah, he was asking me. He goes, "Oh yeah, well, are you new?" And he goes, "Oh, they're always after me." And I was like, "Nothing's gonna really. If you keep up this behavior, nothing's really gonna change when you're out in Surrey. The Surrey gang enforcement team is not gonna give you a break because you're South Asian.
Yeah.
Like that's just not how the world works." But other than that, no, I didn't run into anybody that I knew in those two night shifts. Again, it was a Tuesday night and a Wednesday night, so quiet but still busy. Um, but a great experience overall. Just watching the interaction of the gang suppression team out there, it's amazing. From bar walkthroughs and handshakes with security personnel and the public. It's I think they've built a really good rapport with their presence, but positively is what I like to say, because typically when you're saying the gang unit, everyone's running around saying, okay, well, those are the bad guys, and especially when you're talking to bad guys. But even with this particular individual I'm speaking to, he was speaking with utmost respect to Sergeant Ryan Ferry, and he was very. It was almost like they've known each other on the law side of the world, but
Yeah.
you're still getting compliance, which is huge.
Yeah. It's all about the relationship building, right? And
Exactly.
we know a lot of the times when we go into places, some of them, it's like there's might be six of us, and you walk in, all of a sudden it's like a whole nightclub full of gangsters. And you're like, okay, well, we're definitely outnumbered. Maybe we're outgunned in here, but we have that relationship with people, so they know what our business is about, and you keep it professional, and you get that compliance from them. So I wanted to ask, like, what's your connection to this world? So how did you come up and get into all this stuff with the wraparound program, grip, everything? So what's kind of your background, and what was the trajectory for you?
So starting from the very beginning, we have a traditional South Asian family, right? Where I'm from. My dad immigrated to Canada for a better lifestyle, as do everybody else that's immigrating over. He came over in the late '80s, and and like I said, traditional household, came with close to nothing, and then obviously went back to India, married my mom, and they had me to add to their expenses. So I'm first generation born here. So most of our gang members, especially with the South Asian and newcomers, are typically first generation or have just recently immigrated here. So their parents are, from India or wherever the background is. And when with that being said, my parents worked long hours. Um, so it was, you know, father was sawmill worker, right?
Okay.
In typical fashion. And when South Asians were coming into British Columbia, that was the main job, right? And then he also, in a part time, he's a cab driver. My mom's background was nursing back in India, but when you come into Canada, the credentials don't follow. So she was a carried worker, and working those long hours. My parents just, with my brother and I, who's 4 years younger than me, the focus was sports. That was the outlet. And for me, background wise, I started playing baseball. My dad watched a lot of sports, but didn't really play. And we grew up on the north side of Surrey. For context, south side's a bit more affluent, compared to the north side. I played baseball for Wally.
Okay.
So when you say Wally around here, you think the hood of British Columbia, but that's where I was born and raised. That's where I spent my weekends. And um, it was almost like you wouldn't know any different.
Yeah.
And yeah, you'd have drug users watching your game growing up, right? That was normal. That was normal for us. But other folks coming into town, it's like, what? I was probably one of two South Asians playing baseball. And then when I go back to high school, I kind of went to let's say, like a troubled school per se. Yeah, which was portrayed. And when you're looking at community risk enhancers and school-based risk enhancers, a lot of people will look at you and go, "You went to Matheson?" Right? Because there was an ongoing feud between two high rival high schools, a few gang members coming out of our high schools, but I mean, if you keep your head down and and connect with good mentors, um, you don't go down that trajectory. Was that option there? Most definitely. Like I've known, out of my high school and basketball connections to the community, eight have eight are victims of homicide with gang relation,
Yeah, okay.
right? So, and these are folks, right? One being Carmen Guerrero, right? High
Mm.
level United Nations member. He was a year older than me. He went to Princess Margaret. I went to L.A. Matheson. So we'd frequently have run-ins during basketball, and then when seeing his homicide at the YVR airport here years later when we're adults, you're saying, okay, well, what led you to that path? It was no different than my path. His parents, he's first generation born here. I'm first generation born here. But I think it was, for me, it was, yes, the baseball outlet in Little League, um, and diversifying myself because that world was more, it wasn't all South Asians. When I went to school, it was South Asians, and you'll get the bravado piece of, like, some of my friends smoking weed at the smoke pit, and you want to be involved in that. But then again, I had the sports outlet, and I think my parents really focused on mentorship, like find those mentors. They knew they couldn't work or they couldn't travel with me when I was traveling for sports. But it was more so, shake hands with coaches after you finish. These are things
Yeah.
that my peer groups that I saw in a high school setting, um, possibly didn't do. And but my core group of friends, yes, we were interacted with some of these folks because you still play basketball, but some of those same basketball guys might be, out doing things that aren't good. But we successfully, continued on. One of my friends is a successful engineer. One's actually out in Edmonton at a remand center, um, and a few in real estate, right? So, but for me, growing up, I shifted gears for me when I was about 13. I was like, you know what? I don't want to play baseball because when I go to school, the South Asian community in the school setting, it's like, what? You play baseball?
Yeah.
And and then when you look over at the dynamics, it's yes, it's all white kids, and then all my school is all brown kids. And then my cousin, he was a high level basketball player, so I kind of picked up on basketball in high school. And then later down the road, yeah, you get into a little bit of trouble, and I was hanging out with the negative peer groups, as we would say, in the job I do now, and obviously very peripheral. And a gentleman by the name of Rob Ray came into my life, and we're great friends now. Talk daily, and he was just like, well, focus on basketball. He introduced me to high level basketball academy, athlete basketball. So
So is this a coach?
he was my coach.
Okay.
He's a coach for the academy, but he also worked for the school district.
Hmm.
So he provided that outlet, and he understood the dynamics because his father, he's also first generation born in Canada. So he kind of understood. And it was interesting because when I saw him, I was like, I've seen you before. In my grade 7 class, he actually did a gang education session
All right.
talking about gang. And that's when, it's a wraparound program, and Surrey was kind of implementing the safe school strategy. And Teresa Campbell was in that role, who's my current boss.
Okay.
So it's I would like to say it was a cycle of mentorship. So I was in grade 7 watching Rob present, and then got into a little bit of trouble in high school. Rob got involved in my life. On a community level, he was my basketball coach. Took us to, we played high level, so we played down in Las Vegas, and then down in the United States over the summer. So that kept us occupied. And this is a team of all Surrey kids. So the top few players from each high school. So, so we kind of stuck together there. And then I graduated high school and went on to sports science, and I was working at the sawmill actually, throughout high school. My dad was, like I said, like I mentioned, my dad was a sawmill worker. He's like, all right, well, instead of getting in trouble on weekends, let's have you as a cleanup boy. So they hired me there, and so graveyard shifts on Fridays and Saturdays, you can't get yourself in trouble.
Yeah, yeah.
And then out of high school, I was like, hey, I always had this, you don't know what you want in life phase, and my parents always like, stay in school. Like, we didn't get an education. Connect with your cousins. I have a big family, right? My dad's got 7 siblings, and there's about 15 plus of us as first cousins. And it's funny, you laugh and say, everybody, all the brown community says they're cousins, but yes, I do have over 15 first cousins,
Yes.
who are also some, and I'm one of the younger ones. So I was lucky to get some mentorship from them. Some are lawyers, law enforcement, various different capacities and roles, and that. So I was able to get that guidance from them also. But yeah, going back to it, it was, yeah, I'm at the sawmill, and then I'm going out to Rob and going, hey man, like I've graduated, reconnecting with Rob and saying, I want to do what you were doing, man. Like, get me on. He's like, get your degree in anything, and I'll get you on. And then I was like, okay, well, I can't do this. I can't do anatomy and sports science. Like, that's not for me. And I was like, took another path because I was like, my parents like, stay in school. Like, working at the sawmill, stay in school. I picked up on fire academy. So at 21, I went down in Texas. I was like, I want to become a firefighter. Let's change this up. Lo and behold, you're too young. Then I went back to Rob and said, I'm switching my major from sports science. I got my diploma to psychology. And is there any potential for me to support what you do? I want to give back to the community. I'm volunteering. I was volunteering with Fraser Health, with mental health, as a recreational therapist for substance use. So I had a little bit of background, and then he goes, okay, well, he made me go through the hoops, right? Start coaching for the academy again.
One thing I want to ask on that too is at this point, so it sounds like your parents are very involved in your life. So obviously they have some impact on you and kind of guiding you. When you're talking about your peer groups, up to this point, have you had anyone in your peer groups either A, get killed or go to jail or have like regular involvement with law enforcement? Were you starting to see that at all? Because now high school kind of starts seeing like, we've dealt with some kids at that age, but as soon as you hit that like 18, 19, you kind of see people go like full throttle in one direction or they go in the other.
Yeah, no, that's right. So my core group of friends, we were always peripheral. But there was individuals that are involved in our peer groups that did do that. So after 18, there was one individual that he was hitting cocaine regularly, and he had to support his supply, and that's what he chose to do. And again, he wasn't in my core group. He was a bit peripheral. He was another good friend of ours, his friend, and he chose that lifestyle, and then we shut doors, right? So you do definitely see that trajectory. Like I mentioned, within the age gap of 3 years of individuals that were associates in the peripherals in my school community setting, yes, after 18, you saw the pathway, you saw the behavior in the school hallways that did lead them to getting into the drug trade, and you would never think that they would get to that high of a level, let's say, right?
Okay.
And then you hear the shooting happen. And one particular individual I'm talking about was a year younger than me, and great kid in the hallways, always seeking attention, right? Very bright, very intelligent, and he had a turban at the time. He was actually just immigrated from India, so he wasn't first generation here. Um, and he was involved in a gang related homicide right about 10 blocks from my house. You see the need to belong, as everyone would say, and after high school, you just don't connect with these individuals, right? You don't see them in the school hallways, and then you see them pop up in the news, and you're like, I we knew that pathway was there, and those doors were open, and he was bright enough to get involved in the drug trade.
Yeah. Thinking back to like when I was in high school, I think the biggest thing we had were either street gangs, so generally kind of filled with indigenous people, but a lot of white people in there too. But also we had Vietnamese gangs, and like they were at the level of like org crime stuff. And when you talk about like that sense of belonging, this is something that I've kind of had a lot of questions on. Is like when you get to 18 and you now have like the world is open to you, you can buy a house and you can travel the world. Like nobody has to really do all these things for you. Everything's available. I think, I don't know, like if it's so much a sense of belonging to a certain group based on race or ethnicity, because now what I see a lot of is people just are doing it for like the money and the girls. Usually it's girls because a lot of the guys are the ones involved in these groups. Yeah, I just like when you look at like media, they always portray it as like, instead of just saying street gangs, they'll be like indigenous based street gangs. And it's like, well, like depending where you are, maybe that group of people make up the majority of the numbers or something, but like you're leaving out a whole lot of other people that are involved in that stuff. So when you're seeing this, like, I guess a lot of it's based on where you grew up as to whether you see like it's mostly East Indian people involved in a gang or whatever group it might be. But as you get to that age of 18, do you think that's still such a big factor in whether people decide to, I don't know, commit crime together or be a part of these organized groups? Like you're still going to bring some of your friend group, your peers along because that's who you've known or you trust. But it seems like once you get to that level, it's just about making money. So I'm going to be friends with whoever's making money, and then they all backstab each other on the other end.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And when we're looking at, what you mentioned, like the traditional styles, what we would say in the world we're in now,
Hmm.
like indigenous gangs, for example, we wouldn't see that necessarily here. Here and I'm talking from my high school experience up to now, it's more so the second piece you mentioned of the money, the girls, the glamour. These kids are coming from affluent homes. They're not coming from broken families. We're talking about two-parent households and $1 million homes with cars in the front yard. Is there a need for it? No.
Yeah.
Is there a lack of mentorship? Certainly. In high school, is there so now that I look at it, is there a sense of belonging? Yes, you want to be known.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? And you'll do small things to be known. And then it turns into when you hit 18, some of them are still connected to those one the those adults that are about 24, 25 from high school that are now involved. So it's that cycle of, okay, let's reconnect with Johnny from our old high school that's 24 now that we
Yeah.
know that we used to buy weed from. And let's get it's again, it's for the money, it's for the glamour, it's for the lack of parental and mentorship involvement um, as a whole, and they're not connected to any positive outlets. So it's disorganized. It's not saying, okay, well, I want to become a Hell's Angels member. That's not the job. I want to become all they want to know is all they think is I want to become the boss of my line.
Yes.
Or I want to be like that individual. I want to be in hotels with women and
Well, living out the culture that they see in basically the rap videos.
that's exactly it.
Not to pick on rap, but that's what they listen to and that's what they portray. I don't see nobody's wearing a cowboy hat doing that stuff.
Exactly. Exactly, right. And but that is where we're at now with drill rap and trap style music, and we'll,
Yes.
we'll get into that with the world of work that I do now. But yeah, but just getting out of high school, it's a sense of belonging. It's a sense of getting that money and being known for something, having that sense of power. And when we're looking at like I said, my high school is predominantly South Asian. Um, references to Bindi Johal,
Yeah.
right? References to um, the culture of where they're coming from. Like if you're thinking back in India, every household's got a firearm, right? And they look forward to driving expensive cars and congregating as groups, bigger groups, right? So it all depends on the pathway. Like what's their pathway to where they're going towards. And what I've noticed, even with the work we do and other things, it's creating your own subset. It's like, okay, well, yes, the Brothers Keepers gang, that sounds great, but how do I create my own sense of the Brothers Keepers?
Hmm.
How do I create my own? We would call it a negative peer group that will start forming to essentially a gang, and that's what confuses us in the world of work we do because you're identifying as a Crip or Blood, but you're not,
Yeah.
right? And you have your own name, you have your own acronym.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a video recently about the gangs in Edmonton, and I don't know the guy's name that made it, but, I was watching and I was like, some of this stuff's not actually correct or it's super dated. But then they were saying how like the group up here was like the Crips or Bloods he was mentioning or connected to the US one. I was like, I don't know about that. So, there's lots of people just say they are something just for the image, the persona, but also to kind of put up that facade of, I don't know if it's toughness or what it is. But one thing I did want to kind of just go back on was you were saying that like a lot of these people will come from the affluent homes, right? So they got all this stuff, and this is like talking about like material things, right? I got cars, my parents got this nice house. Like I don't have to do things because I'm some low socioeconomic group. I'm, at the shelters asking for meals or whatever it might be. So joining a group isn't necessarily for like security, a sense of belonging in the sense of I don't have a family. Now this is my family. I had one person mention when I think I've commented somewhere on social media about this, and they brought up a good point. So I give them credit for this. It's, well, but you don't know what's going on in that home. So okay, maybe they don't have a good relationship with a parent at home, or maybe the kid thinks it's too strict, but they still have like a lot of these pillars that kind of, I don't know, lead you, like you said, you have some form of mentorship, you have family around, like somebody's going to rally around you. You're not just left to the streets. So from that perspective, what I wonder is, how do people go from, I've got a family around, I have a house, my parents give me their super nice BMW to drive around or whatever it might be, to being a killer, to being a person who sells fentanyl or whatever it might be? And maybe that's a question for Jordan Peterson or somebody that's right into the psychology of it. But it's like, it's just, how do you get to a point where you become this big time drug dealer who's dealing with like narco terrorists and stuff? Because we see that right from people in Edmonton, people in Calgary, Vancouver, obviously is well known, but or Surrey. But it's like we have guys here in Edmonton that we know are hanging out with cartel members, and same with Calgary. Like, so how do you get to that point? And is that just on the drive is just being cool? Like, so, what are your kind of thoughts around that?
Well, that's a good point, and I think, like I said, I'm fortunate enough that my dad, he was an alcoholic. So as a male father figure, he wasn't an alcoholic, but he also had still made time for us on the weekend, although he's working long hours during the day. But some of these kids, they when we're looking at the South Asian community, it's unfortunate because they want a bigger house than their neighbor's house. They want a nicer car than the neighbor's or an uncle. That's how it works. That's the reality of it.
Yeah.
Um, I can see that through our generation, what we see now. And then when I did the work, when you're pulling up to these houses and going, what? Like, dad's a truck driver. No, dad's doing long haul. Mom's working stupid amount of hours and not going to, parent teacher interviews. So, and then, or dad, works long hours and he's got an alcohol problem. And that's quite common in the community. Um, so substance use concerns, and that does impact the upbringing of a young kid. Because I'm looking back and reflecting to my life, I was fortunate enough to have my evenings filled with baseball practices, basketball practices. These kids don't, and that path, the familial domain has a huge impact to their upbringing and then how they portray themselves out there.
Okay.
When I'm going referencing back to these $1 million homes, you're looking at several different mortgages.
Yeah.
The kid wants a Range Rover, we're getting another mortgage. So you probably got 5 folks on that just to approve for this huge house they're living in, this mansion they're living in. So these parents are just getting by,
Yeah.
trying to compete. So I'm trying to get everyone to gather a sense of the mindset of some of these South Asian folks, right? So it's like they're just getting by, but it looks like they're rich. So that time that they're spending at work, they're not spending with their kids
Yeah.
at home. And in that piece, and then when we're looking for the sense of belonging, when I go back to that, refer back to that, they just don't know what a positive mentor or a positive team environment and a family environment looks like. And then, like I said, in the historical piece, you always want to have all these extravagant things, and you got them, but then you always want to connect with, like a kid straight up told me, like, I was like, you got everything, right? When I was working with one individual, you got everything. What? You drive a nicer car than me,
Yeah.
right? And I'm working with you. This doesn't add up. And he'll tell you, but it's more so connecting on that parting level. They don't have the extra money. The parents still won't give them, here's $50, go watch a movie and do these things. So they don't have that. So they'll go seeking for that. And when they do, they're involved with other individuals that probably don't have the same upbringing or maybe have a similar one that can kind of connect to the same level. Because when I'm looking back at it, and like I said, yeah, I don't have that in depth of a psych background, but when I'm looking back, they all have the same sort of risk enhancers and upbringing. And when you get to a point where you're losing product on the street, you're these guys 4 or 5 years older, like you said, are turning back on them, like turn on them.
Yeah.
They don't have another mentor to go to. So they're lacking community mentorship. They're lacking potential familial mentorship. So there's not an older cousin that's going to be like, that's probably a bad idea, Johnny.
Mm-hmm.
Right? No, they're not going to say that. So that's when what I would say is they see it at a young age happening at these trap houses or wherever they're kind of congregating, and then that's when they're acting. And I think a hit on the street is a high level hit, or is probably worth about, I don't know, 30 or 40 grand, and you're guaranteed if you get caught, they'll help you out with lawyer fees. These kids are probably making about 4 grand, 5 grand. And then again, it's a lot on the line. They get that piece of becoming the captain on the team. So running your own line, like you have that power now to recruit and continue that cycle. So I think watching it from those younger adults that they're working for, and then redoing it on the street. And again, coming from affluent home, like when we look at it, oh, you're living in a huge house, but mom and dad are never home.
Mm-hmm.
Mom and dad are working. And then not understanding those risk enhancers. So when we're working the wraparound program, and even the current work we're doing when we're consulting on some of these files, and you're looking at prevention intervention, let's look at all those domains. What led this individual to that pathway, right? Mental health will be a huge factor, right? What's high functioning, low functioning, and then some of these families, like I said, they're not always from affluent homes, so it could be poverty, could be some sort of poverty, but you just don't see it.
Yeah,
like not every individual has the same pathway to gang associated behavior. It's what they see, and I think their connection and mentorship level that leads them to that. And I think understanding all the 5 domains, and now at Safer Schools Together, we've added this digital domain because we have a number of net bangers, as you probably are aware of. But disorganized groups, and then they might have some familial connections involved already. Cousins might be already in the game,
mm-hmm.
right? And oftentimes we've dealt with cases where the individual's working for the cousin, or the cousin's got their back through a family connection.
Yeah.
So I think it's a variety of reasons, but it's what they see through gangster rap music potentially, or what they've seen firsthand when it comes to violence. Or some of the youth I used to work with have watched watched their boss, assault other workers, other line workers. And you don't want to get there, but then they now have the power to do that to their recruits.
Yeah. I don't think a lot of this comes down to like race-based, or sorry, I don't think it's based on race, how some of these gangs operate, but it's definitely culture. And based on your culture, so whether you come from Indian background, you're Vietnamese, you're, I don't know, some country in Europe, whatever it is, you're going to kind of trend towards certain crime types, maybe.
Right.
You're going to trend toward certain types of groups. We even see that, just some of the criminal element. I think we kind of get caught up in what the media says and how they frame things, the language we use. One of the things I was going to ask you too is, because you say South Asian a lot, and maybe people are going to think, I always think this when I hear this, and I'm like, well, people might not know Jesse's not, he's not Vietnamese. Because that's kind of in the South Asian area. It's like, do you think the language we're using has a big impact? And I'll come back to ask that again, but it's just whenever I've talked to informants or people we just deal with on the street or whatever it might be, they laugh at the media all the time and they're like, what the hell are they talking about? And like, why are they trying to guise it as this thing? Or it's like, that's some bullshit. Like, why don't you just say it this way or tell it like it is? So I'm wondering, do you ever get a sense of, do you think like guising it as South Asian, or with a lot of Somalian violence we had here, they call it Central East African. I'm just like, Central, East, and then in Africa. I was like, how many directions do we need in the name to figure out what it is? And it's like if we want to actually address the problem and have, the politicians like say we're going to have hard conversations, but nobody ever really does. How much of the truth can we put out there and actually talk about the things we need to talk about? Because if we're going to address things like culture, right? Culture is kind of pertinent to, it's from a certain area or a certain group of people. If we want to address that, then we have to kind of speak in real terms. So I'm wondering, does language play a big part in what you do? Maybe how you frame things to people? Is there a reason for why we say the things we say?
We're looking at culture and ethnicity background. I can tell you, some of the kids will be like, what is a South Asian?
Yeah.
Because on the street, we're known as brown,
Mhm.
right? We're brown. They go by color, right? But then that's in Canada. Brown is South Asian, right? And if you're looking in brown in the United States, that's Hispanic,
Yeah, exactly.
right? So you'll confuse professionals. I think when we're looking at culture based, oftentimes folks will come out and say, "Why are we being targeted? Like, why does the media keep saying it's a South Asian gang problem or it's a Punjabi gang problem because that's a language we speak?" It's because some of these individuals are involved, right? And I think for when you look at gang members, they're probably thinking, like, well, what is a South Asian, right? I'm brown, I'm Punjabi,
Yeah.
I'm whatever it may be, right? So I think in that culture piece, it varies, right? In the United States, we might not be known as South Asians. I think when we're identifying some of these groups or individuals in the media, it can be referenced. Well, you can't use color, but I think it varies from region to region, and actually giving them an update or a background of where these individuals are from, so where they originate from, instead of just using generic South Asian. Well, these individuals originated from India and the state of Punjab. And then that will actually resonate with some of the game members knowing, okay, well, they're actually speaking to me and not laugh about it. Um, so kind of getting in depth of understanding of where they're actually from.
Well, and that,
Does that answer your question?
yeah, and I think, but it also plays into, okay, like you were saying earlier, you want to know the mentality of somebody that you're dealing with. Well, I got to know who exactly I'm dealing with, right? But then everybody with the sensitivities and stuff, it's, well, we got to play nice and say it like a very soft way because the whole community is going to get picked on. It's like, they're not. But if you just do your job and like say, it's not everyone in the community, we're dealing with this specific group of people out of that community. And then you also bring in people from there to help you with the issues. I think it's just, yeah, I think we do people a lot of disservice with the language that we use.
Yes, no, and I agree, and I think there should be a background done on where they're coming from, what their dynamics are,
Yes.
right? Like I mentioned, Punjab, India, yeah, somewhere state, like their weapons at houses are normal. It's part of let's say culture. Are they always gang banging out there? No, that's not the case. If you're coming from a war torn country, what's the background of where they're coming from? Have they seen violence? Have they seen somebody die
Yes.
in front of them? So I think yes, definitely before I think we have to look in the background of that culture before we start putting it in the media and framing it particular ways. And that helps. One, it helps the person that's writing the article understand, and and let's not target communities because depending on the region, it's not just South Asians or brown people say involved, right?
Yeah.
We know it's diverse now. It's like they create their own United Nations.
Yeah.
It's however they're going to make money, right? So it's not just going to be predominantly South Asians. Yes, some of the bosses might be, but I can tell you right now, and you're from your background, you're aware too that there's other cultures and ethnicities involved,
Yeah.
right? At some degree, at some level, whether it be at the street level, um, it's not just one particular group. Either they're purchasing from the Hell's Angels, right? It's gonna be the Somali community purchasing from the Hell's Angels. So there's definitely crossover.
Yeah.
Is what I'm trying to get at.
So I think we got a lot of my personal questions out of the way. Let's
No,
talk
no, all
about
good.
your work with the prevention intervention side of things. And Is most of your work focus on? Is it all focused on youth, or is it just like the majority of it?
So, as you know, if we don't, and during our trainings, we try providing a high level focus on this. It's not just focusing on youth, because if you don't know what's happening in the adult world, you won't know what's happening in the youth world, right? So we'll always start our trainings off, well, high level. This is what's happening, tailored to your region. So no, it's looking at the social network analysis between youth and adult crime groups
Okay.
for my current work. So seeing if they're interacting on social media, if they're following each other, right? So it's yes, it's you. You can only put in, I would say, prevention intervention strategies based off of the dynamics, the gang dynamics. So having a high level understanding of what's happening in the organized crime world. So that goes back to my point of collaboration. Collaboration is a huge aspect. So having a closer relationship with law enforcement, right? You might not be clear to receive some of that information, but at least they can provide you what's happening at the street level. So they have an understanding of what kids might be connected to which organized crime group.
So, in your partnership with law enforcement, is a lot of your stuff kind of acting as just intelligence, or is any of your stuff ending up as evidence where you can actually get called to court?
All right. So just in my role now with Safer Schools Together, we have a team of threat analysts. So similar to crime analysts, but we work in a prevention and the intervention lens. So open source data per community. So for example, with our partnership with the Ministry of Education here in the province, we support all 60 districts. So our analysts will be providing what's called a worrisome online behavior report. So basically a document of open source data of all risk enhancers, right? That can be mental health related, gang associated behavior. And with that, it's before the fact and providing it to the school district, and then allowing the school district to connect with the local law enforcement agencies. We will, as identified subject matter experts, support the consultation piece of breaking those individuals down, because so for an example, say if a youth has a firearm and he's taking a picture of a gang member from Ontario, for example, that's actually happened. That law enforcement agency in a rural community will not know who that gang member is. Awesome, thanks. It looks like it looks like a gang member, but who and what, who is he and who's he associated to?
Okay.
So that's my role, would be kind of breaking that down and understanding. Hey, look, whoever's this youth that's involved, he's involved with this gang member who's actually a part of like the Driftwood Crips out of Ontario, but he was doing a concert and connect with the youth. So kind of breaking
Mhm.
that report down. And then sometimes, yes. So if it goes to the law enforcement needing support on evidence and using our report, and we're subpoenaed, yes, we will stand for evidence. But the purpose of our report will remain for the prevention and intervention. Yes, we know there's a firearm there. How can we support with like a firearms expert report? We have a consultant who's awesome, Frank Grosbeach, who will put together a report based off of looking at what we've gathered, to support maybe a warrant for searching the house for a firearm.
Mm.
So yes, it's a bit of both, but more so the prevention and intervention
Okay.
side. But if it's an imminent threat, then yes, most definitely we would support that particular district or community we're working with.
Is all of the work gang related, or have you ever had any kids come through this program that are on the extremism side? So we're talking whether it's religious extremism or ideological, or do you have anybody that's kind of going out on those extremes at all?
Yes, certainly, certainly, and
Okay.
we're seeing actually an increase of it. So
Really?
when we're looking at open source data, my department, my side of the world, I'd focus on the gang piece and supporting the gang reduction component. But the generic report as a whole will be identifying radicalization, hate and racism, a variety of risk enhancers. So it's a checkbox that if they come across somebody displaying that behavior, they'll check those boxes off. You'd be surprised, a lot of it does correlate with the gang world. That's why I'm aware of it. So anything that's cited under gang associated behavior, possession of firearms, drugs, any of those pieces, you might see a crossover with radicalization.
Yeah.
So yes, there we do note that, and I think we're one of the agencies that probably have a high number of youth data in relation to all these risk and answers.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to get youth data. We don't charge our youth.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's hard. That's part of the issue, right? There's actually there's a paper, I might have to find it and send to you. It has to do with, what was the exact connection? It was connecting like organized crime and extremism, and just some of the motivators behind it. I'll find it and kind of hook you up with that.
Well, that'd be huge.
So just kind of back on the prevention side, what are some of the good strategies that work, and have you ever seen ones that don't work? So is there anything you've actually tried, whether it's through personal stuff or through the programs, and you're like, ooh, this one actually didn't work, or the people you're dealing with, they're like, that's just going to create more gang guys.
So on the prevention side, so in my previous role with the Surrey School District as a wraparound worker, we did facilitate some programming. And I think it was what works is what, especially when we're looking at newcomers coming into our communities and the influx in Surrey currently and at that point in time, well, 5 years ago, is connecting them to their roots. So
Okay.
again, gathering a group of high level, I'll just give you a high level example of one of the programs. It was tailored towards grade sixes and sevens. So getting law enforcement, community stakeholders, counseling agencies into classrooms early to kind of remove that uniform barrier, because some of these youth that are coming, from around the world, um, they might not have that report of being able to talk to a law enforcement officer because law enforcement is corrupt from where they're coming from. So getting them at an earlier age and a generic audience. So we're not really we're tailoring it based on demographics, but it's going to be everybody, and it's going to be, diverse approach. So what was your path? For an example, their SRO would come in, or SLO, school resource officers, would come in and present their pathway to law enforcement and what they do in their community. You'd have a counselor, one of the counselors come in and go, okay, well, I'm a counselor. You have this resource, and kind of get that stigma out of the way of you can speak to and get supports early. And then again, you see that an engagement as they go into secondary school, right? And
Okay.
we kind of did this at we identified 2 school sites and feeder schools on a preventative level. What we see that didn't work was finding a place and putting kids on the pathway to gang associated behavior into one program at one location. Because what are you doing? You're just expanding their network.
Is it, that would be kind of like the idea around when we put people in jail, they just
Yes,
make more connections in jail? Okay.
exactly. That's exactly it. So I mean, some of these kids, they'll connect through social media anyway, and form their negative peer groups across cities, across districts. But we had a great prevention intervention um, programming and collaboration at that point in time. And one of the facilities was called Game Ready Fitness, and it was ex CFL players, mentors, and it was more so like, they had a facility, but sometimes we noticed we'd be bringing all of our at-risk kids from various different caseloads into the same place at the same time, or taking them on outings at the same time. So that doesn't work. So going back to the drawing board, you want to separate depending on threshold and involvement,
Mm.
and kind of really tailor that approach, right? And yes, it does go back to, when you're inside, right? When you're in jail, you're bringing everybody together. So on a preventative level, we have to look at risk enhancers and their threshold of involvement. If they're entrenched and high functioning, all they're going to do is start and recruit other vulnerable kids,
Yeah.
right? So separating ages, separating the threshold of involvement.
When you're doing the prevention side of things, do you think, would that be kind of like along the lines of like maybe a scared straight program? You ever see those on TV where they like bring a bunch of kids in and they have them go into the jails, and like they have somebody there that's been shot a million times and he's in a million gangs, and kind of gives the story. So would something like that work or no?
I would always say no.
Yeah.
That's not the approach, because you're almost glorifying it. So imagine, at their psychological level and their age, you coming in and kind of going, well, this is a lifestyle, the scare straight tactic without resources after. I don't see it work.
Okay.
I think more about choices, tailoring it towards what choices you're making, and yeah, getting experiential speakers are huge, right? Some of the ones we collaborate with are we do bring them in, and they're vetted by law enforcement. But you're talking about the choices and the pathways that led them to the life they did and how they exited. But if we bring in, okay, well, we're ripping, you get involved in this lifestyle and you get your toenails ripped off, I would disagree, because you're almost, the high functioning kids, they're like, okay, well, great, I got another piece in my belt. So with that said, experiential speakers, we're huge fans of. The scare straight tactic typically doesn't work,
Yeah.
right? It's kids nowadays will laugh at it because normally, and another thing I'm always mindful of is these kids might know more than you. So if we have an experiential speaker that was traditionally in a gang, right? Years ago, the gang dynamics have changed. It's on social media. They're gonna laugh at you,
Yeah.
at your stories. And that's the reality of it, right? Which is and even though that experiential speaker is speaking from the heart and they've been through this lifestyle and they're telling you it's not worth it, um, by the time we get this person vetted and into a school, because we got to vet them to get them into a school, our parents are going to be calling us saying, "Why was this gang member at our school presented to our kids?" Um, so by the time we get them vetted and into a school, the gang landscape's changed. They're operating on social media.
Yeah, they lose the relevancy, the recency.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. No, that's exactly it. So, yeah, to back to that point, I think the scare tactic definitely doesn't work. I think it's more so based on choices and your pathway to involvement.
Talking about some of your stuff now. So you're in the digital realm of things.
Yes, sir.
And can you explain to people what exactly that is that you do? And then what are we seeing? What are we seeing with social media and, just pop culture and everything, all the influences that kids have nowadays?
Yeah. So, like I said, going from working on the street with individuals out that were entrenched and involved, and then going into this world was a shift, right? You're kind of going, I was boots on the ground. Now I'm consulting on some of these files, and what are they saying? Like, look at the language that they're using. Like, what's going on? So, like I said, I'm fortunate at Safer Schools Together to have a team of strong threat analysts that put together that report. And then my objective would be to kind of almost do a social network analysis and analyze the language they're using because it's always evolving. They're speaking through emojis, right? So these are the pieces that even as long as gang cops, you don't have time to sit there and decipher emojis. You got to be on the street, active, go, 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 right? So my objective is to kind of go through these reports, one, see who they're connected to, and what we'll notice now, which I can set some light on, is what we've noticed is the hub being the Ontario region,
Okay. Yeah.
right? So the Driftwood Crips, the Wasp Gang, and we'll have individuals from all the way from New Brunswick, from our case files in New Brunswick to BC to Alberta, they'll identify as the Wasp Gang, right? A bunch of kids. You're talking about 12 and 13-year-olds that listen to this drill trap style music that want to be like what they see online. So it, like I said, it's for me, it's seeing the social network analysis piece of connectivity. How connected are they? Because some of these kids, you look and you laugh and you're like, you wouldn't last a day in the Jane Finch area in Ontario. Like that's traditional gangs. But these traditional gangs, they're also posting music or snippets of music that they want these kids to repost to gain clout and those pieces. So and then we'll see our kids kind of post their version, which is absolute trash of gangster rap music, and then tag known gang members out of Ontario, right? One being Pressa, who's a huge influence on our youth, and once they repost it and they have thousands of followers, these guys start gaining notoriety. And like I said, they'll never probably physically meet, but they are on Instagram Live. So paying attention how active they're tapping in, and and then that's what I mean. So when you're looking at youth and their connection to adults, is that adult reposting that post?
Mm.
Is that adult commenting on our post? Which area is that youth from? So those are the pieces I almost on an investigative level that you want to kind of decipher to break down to that community. Because on a macro level, some of these detachments, they're not paying attention to what's happening in Ontario. They're busy with their day-to-day job. But then it's kind of breaking it down so they have an understanding. So for trends, yes, it's emojis, right? Um, what do the WAS gang and what do they identify as? Why are youth posting like a blue dot? And then you get up to the Hell's Angels, right? They've got a subset of the Wolfpack group that's got a record label now.
Yeah.
So it's and that there's your shift, right? It's from a traditional gang, right? That's based out of Jane and Finch having their record label, right? Blue Feather Records. And then you got the Hells Angels, and they're using the wolf emoji as their identifier. They're using the white and red emojis to identify as part of the Hells Angels. So you got from adults, and then you got kids kind of changing it, and then the U.S. has an impact on that because whatever they're doing down there, it's going to make its way north of the border, right? So whatever the actual traditional rappers out of the Compton region, the Chicago area are doing, we're mimicking that. And then we'll see some of those low level guys come out here for tour.
Yeah.
So
most of our media, I think, is like it's so heavily influenced by the U.S. and then it trickles down to, you say, like the bigger regions like Ontario, right? And then Ontario is going to have influence on the rest of Canada or whatever direction the influence takes. We see that recently with one of Mercury's videos.
that's right.
He's straight up got guys wearing Hell's Angel stuff
Exactly.
in there. So imagine they're full patch members. And I think you talk about Pressa. We've had issues with Pressa. Yeah, it'd be hard to combat a lot of this. We were talking offline about how do you say the name? Six Demics?
Yes, Six Demics, the social media account.
Yeah, you see a lot of that stuff getting posted now too, where it's just like the instant release of videos and like the shootings and everything. It's just like some of that stuff's got to be entered as evidence. But do you kind of track a lot of those things being in your position right now?
Yeah, yes. Like I said, it's we look for digital leakage, and they provide all of that. And sometimes, as you're probably aware, some of these accounts, like that one, they'll post before you even know what's happened.
Yeah.
Or they know before it's about to happen. And yes, so most definitely. And I always tell even gang cops when I'm providing this training down south of the border, pay attention to those accounts because you'll get footage that you might not be getting when you're investigating, and that might be that puzzle piece that solves it all. But also cross-reference their information because you never know if it's legitimate, right?
Yes.
I call them gang snitch accounts, right? So that's how I refer to it as. They're all snitching on each other, and they know that these social media news outlet pages have thousands, if not thousands, of followers. And not only that, they actually collaborate with other gang pages.
Yes.
So so say there's one on the East Coast, there's one on the West Coast that's got about 10,000 followers. Once they repost, you best bet you're going to have 20,000 plus views on that particular post. So I always say, I think it's huge. I mean, some of our gang members are youth or adults follow those pages.
Yeah.
So they're in the know of what's happening through these accounts. So for law enforcement, it's a huge piece to stay in touch with those accounts, as you'll gain a lot of understanding of the dynamics, and always cross-reference with your own team and your detachment, right? You want to make sure that information is valid. And because sometimes it can be just irrelevant information, and we're acting on just something based off this social media account. We don't know who's running that account.
I think with some of these videos, I want to say you kind of find two camps in policing, where one is, if it can't be used, people that think if it can't be used as evidence, I don't want to know it at all, which is a horrible way to think. And then there's others where it's like, everything is intelligence and I can know it, but I don't need to use it as evidence. But it still helps me know that I'm at least going in the right direction. So I'm not wasting days, weeks, months doing something that has no relevancy to solving a crime. They miss the intelligence aspect of it. It's also one of the downfalls of law enforcement, which I've talked about on here a million times. I don't think we do a very good job of that high level intelligence collection. We don't have it's almost non-existent, the social media monitoring, but we almost need to have a whole unit dedicated to social media, all that open source, the OSINT stuff. We need to have a presence in these realms. And people think, oh no, you're the NSA and you're like spying on everything I'm doing. I was like, police barely have enough, like half the cars we have, like door panels are peeling off and stuff. I'm not monitoring, you know, every purchase you make on your credit card, that kind of thing. But we just simply need to have a presence in these worlds just so we know we have at least some handle on what's actually going on. And, when it would help when we go talk to the media, when we go talk to the community groups and
Mhm.
say, like, hey, we actually do have some idea, but maybe you can help us with the other piece or the private partnerships like you talk about.
Right, right.
Yeah, I think these accounts, they're interesting. Like you're saying, you have to corroborate information, obviously. If we want to use it as evidence, we have to corroborate. We have to do the police work on the back end to make sure what we're looking at is real,
Mhm.
especially with deep fakes coming, and that it's something that we can use. But yeah, how do you monitor all this stuff? Like, do you have to go and get subscriptions to all these accounts, and then you have like full access, or do you just kind of scour strictly what's available uh, publicly, like no paywalls, nothing?
So we don't use a monitoring software. So that creates more work, in depth, but it also speaks to the real time access of the work. So our analysts, they kind of work on open source. Everything's open source, um, and those techniques to gather the material. So it's about some of our training, our digital threat assessment training, for example, will provide you how to create an alias account and how to use trending, say, hashtags or particular location settings to identify some of them. Like for an example, I mentioned the WASP group, right? Or they identify as 2X. So if I'm coming to Edmonton and I want to look at some of the Edmonton gang members, I would put on YEG, YEG, or 2X in my search bar, and I'm going to get a number of individuals posting gang associated behavior. So it's staying up to having the capacity to stay up to trends is a huge piece. Um, but everything's open source. So from that one, you'll find one high flyer, and after that, you can start getting information. But it's more so staying on top of your current climate and dynamics. I think that's for law enforcement. When I go in and present, that's where the focus is really understanding the language they're using, what identifiers they're using on social media, what emojis are relevant to you right now. Because, like I said, some folks don't have the capacity. Some detachments don't have the capacity. Our crime analysts are super swamped in these detachments working on
Yeah.
project-based work, but they don't have time for that preventative or looking at it before the fact and keeping up with trends. So I think so our assessments are all open source. Um and then obviously sometimes we'll get what's called a case consultation, would be an intake coming in real time. So our analysts work 24/7. For the folks that we have contracts with, they can law enforcement or school side can say, hey, look, there's an incident about to occur. I'm hearing this. Can you please support? So then our analysts will
Okay.
then go in real time, kind of put together a report for them to understand what's happening on the social media side. But like I said, it's staying relevant of trends, and you'd be shocked to know when I go in and say, are folks familiar with these applications?" I'll put just the generic ones up, and some of them aren't familiar with Telegram per se, an encrypted platform.
Yeah.
And but like again, you can't blame them because it's hard to stay on top. Like I said, I'd be lost if I didn't have my team, right? Because I technically don't do the assessments. I decipher the assessments to put together the bigger picture and the social network analysis piece. Um, and like right now, if you're a gang cop, you want to look at Telegram, and you can tap into Telegram,
Yeah.
right? It's still open source, right? Are they hiding their names? Yeah, but are you able to maybe decipher and identify the individual by face or by some sort of digital leakage component that might assist your investigation? We recently just worked on a file whereby there's a kid in a rural region in northern BC that was selling firearms and vapes, right? Boxes of vapes. And then you go into his followers, and he's following a Telegram account based out of Texas,
Oh, really? Okay.
right? So, and then you kind of you kind of analyze it, and you look at the firearms, which are like pink and gold, and then you cross reference with that Telegram page of the gentleman from Texas who they're you see that connection, and you put one and one together, right? It's right there, and it's happening. And I think we got to understand that it's there, but I think it's more so about staying on top of the dynamics and current trends as you're working it. And the social media world, I think you just have to be aware of it. Um, it's always evolving. Like even when I'm providing training to different various states or provinces, I my main goal is to tailor it to what's happening right now and what's happening in that particular city I'm going into. So
Mm-hmm.
no one training will ever remain the same for myself and my 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 partner Sergeant Raj Jaswal. He's we're on the same page on that. Like we will never go into a community because we co-present, and he'll kind of understand the digital realm. And that's our goal is to make sure we have everything up to date from our threat analyst, and we kind of tailor our session to that particular community of what they're seeing. You get a wholesome picture, but then you get a picture of what might be coming your way.
Yeah. Okay.
So be vigilant of it.
Very cool. We're just kind of coming up to the end of the time. I want to make sure you get a chance to tell people how to follow you, find your work, social media, websites, anything in particular. And I'll post all that stuff in the episode description when I get it up.
Awesome. That sounds great. Yeah, you can find us at on our website, on LinkedIn at saferschoolstogether.com. Our email is info@saferschoolstogether.com. If you're more focused towards the gang reduction through informed practice piece, that would be grip@saferschoolstogether.com. And we're always happy. Like I said, we work North America wide. We have various contracts in the United States and here in Canada. So if there's any training that or any trends updates that are needed on any of the school safety aspect, or the gang world, we're always happy to support. My boss is always Teresa's always staying innovative on how she can support, and we'll find a way of providing those supports.
Very good. I'll remind everybody just, like, follow along, leave a comment, share. It's the only way we're going to get the message out there and help out. So support Safer Schools Together, help Jessy out, get Jessy a job. Especially in a nice place that's hot, not just Edmonton. So
yeah, we get fortunate once in a while. We met in Florida. That was good, right? Florida Gang Investigators Association. So with this job, yes, you get the perks of traveling to hot places. We're out in Phoenix for the National School Resource Officers Conference. So, but those are stints. And then obviously our office is back here in South Surrey.
Sounds
and then
good.
you get a little bit of everything. But I'm happy to always support Edmonton, and I think they got a great strategy going at the moment at a foundational level. And I think if we can kind of support to get that into a place of further collaboration, it'd be fantastic.
Yeah, no, everybody support Jessy and the Safer Schools Together program. So, thanks for being on the show today, and just hang on the line for 1 second.
Yes, sir.